Hello and welcome to the Forties Formula, your go-to place for insightful discussions on navigating your 40s and thriving in this transformative decade.
We're your hosts, Amanda and Jasmin, two women that are passionate about exploring the challenges and adventures that come with turning 40 and what lies ahead.
Today we're talking with Andrea Tan from the Athena Rising. Andrea is a certified sex, love, and relationship coach who works with individuals and couples to create an empowered and embodied relationship with their love and intimate lives. She educates through her monthly workshops and private coaching on sexual wellness and health, as well as jade egg coaching for women and emotional healing through a modern Asian lens. Andrea has also been featured prominently in media, social media channels, speaking events, and interviews. And she recently published a chapter on sexual health in the women's health book, All About Eve. So I had the pleasure of meeting Andrea at a postpartum event that we did for mummies. And it was one of the it was the first wellness event that I've been involved with, and I've been involved with so many, right? That we actually considered sexual health as a part of women's health. And I feel like it's dropped out of the conversation so much. And when it comes to women in their 40s, I think it gets dropped down the to-do list as well. Do you feel that way?
Definitely. I mean, women in their 40s have so much going on. It's not just family, it's also their career, what they are building in their life, what they're creating. And it becomes part of a to-do list. And that's the other thing that I noticed when you kind of said, it drops down the to-do list.
Yeah.
It shouldn't even be on a to-do list.
Yeah,
it's not a chore, it's not a job, it's not something else to get ticked off the list.
Yeah. And I think, it's funny. You're right. I definitely use that language because I think in a way that is somehow how I think about it. And I think that comes as a product of being on this like fertility, trying to get pregnant, mapping my days, sex is part of an instrumental, function of my life. And it's like, how do you help women that are now done conceiving, okay, for good? How do you help us get back into thinking about sex as something that's just spontaneous and fun?
Well, for a lot of women who have just given birth or, have a lot of young kids, I always ask them to take it slowly. I mean, you took 9 months to have a baby. You kind of need a lot of adjustment after that. The other is also the fact that there are going to be changes. I think a lot of times we talk about getting back to normal, but the normal isn't really quite the same normal anymore. And we do a lot of comparisons. I think comparisons is what really kills the vibe sometimes because we're like, why can't we get back to that time? Why can't I be this way, or why can't I react this way? But it really is about adjusting to a very different schedule. And this is where your partner is really important because it's teamwork, right?
Yeah, what can he do? How can he help me?
Yeah.
Let's put the blame on him.
Yeah, I mean, nothing to pick up from my tone here. No, but what can partners do to help women through this?
Yeah, so what can they help, right? It's really not just with the kids and the baby. It's also with what can they do to help with the sex life or with pleasure in the bedroom. Do they have to support in terms of setting up certain environments? Do they have to make sure that certain schedules are out of the way? Is it about some things that we say? We don't often talk with our partner about what we want in intimacy. Like, I need you to compliment my body, for instance. We don't often ask for these things, but sometimes it's that simple. And our partner really appreciates that, because they're like, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do, right? So
girl, you're so right. But it's funny, just as you said that, right? Like, I can't imagine myself saying to my partner, like, I need you to tell me that I look hot. But I think I do. So I think, empowering yourself and your clients, that's what you do, I think, is really important because it does seem awkward, I think, the first time you would think of approaching like that. I mean, what do you think, Jasmin? Is that something that you'd be, walk right in and say?
No, I think it's really weird. So my husband and I, we've been together for, 20 years, right? So for us, it's really different. I think we're very open with each other. We just say it as it is. I don't feel like I need to sort of pacific around him and be like, you need to tell me I look nice. I don't know. I think we have a different relationship so that, if we want something or we want to say something, we will just say it. But I feel like there are women out there who can't be as open. And it could just be, am I going to hurt their feelings? Or does he feel the same way? Or what does he think? Like you said, when you have kids, your body does change. And I feel if we are not content in our body, are we sort of projecting it on to our partners?
And the thing is, you said 20 years, right? So
Yeah.
20 years is a testimony of how you communicate. It's precisely that. And so it's not that like some women do and some women don't, but sometimes with the whole busyness of the change, you're dealing with a newborn. If you have kids and a newborn, that's like a whole new crazy level, right? So sometimes we do forget. So these are reminders like I like to often give my clients just to remind them, like you can have that conversation.
Yeah.
You can ask. And it's really not about trying to be over sexual in the conversation. It's really, what do you need from your partner to feel better or to feel more comfortable in the mood or just to feel less stressed around the new baby?
Yeah. And when you're working with clients, are you often working with women alone? Are you working with men alone? Or are you working with couples? Or do you do all of it?
I do all of it, but predominantly now it's a lot more of women. And some couples. Because when couples work with me, both have to be willing, and sometimes there's a little bit of mismatch between what they want. But a lot of women are actively now kind of seeking help and just seeking some sort of different perspectives.
Yeah. And when you say like both parties have to be willing, have you had a couple that you've worked with where you kind of had to drag it out of one of them and the other one was, one was there to be there, one was there for the ride type thing?
Yes, often. But to be fair, it's not because, of the circumstances that led them to the session. Sometimes when you decide that this is really something that you want, especially we're talking intimacy, we're talking pleasure, we're talking getting super comfortable in your relationship and vulnerable. And then you start taking the action to get there, like for example, come for a session, get from information. And when you actually step in that session, it puts you in a whole different space and sometimes you do react a little bit differently. So it could be that as well. But yeah, I mean, you definitely get that because no two people in the same relationship are the same. Yeah. And I think that's a very important thing for us to take note because often we are kind of in our space a lot, in our head a lot, and we forget to see things from our partner's view. We think we kind of know, but that's where conversation needs to come in.
Yeah, you're so right.
I have a friend who has been with her partner for a very long time. They do have kids, and she basically confided in me that she just does not have the desire anymore. It's just out of her system. She's still attracted to her husband, but she just has no desire to be intimate. What would you say to somebody like that when they're at that point where it's just no longer there?
Well, I mean, there are many reasons why that happens. And to be honest, out of a bunch of those, one of the reasons is, yes, they are just not really sexually attracted to their partner. But there could be a lot of other factors as well, especially for women in their 40s. I find that it's almost like an accumulated level of stress. When you have stress that's coming from different angles, like your family, your career, even other things in your life, even how you feel in your relationship, and these are low-level kind of anxiety and stress that kind of accumulates. It kind of hits a point in your 40s where you're like, enough is enough. Yeah. And, why don't I just not do anything? Because that's the easier way out. So sometimes there is that segment that I see, and I often look in terms of how do we reignite some sort of excitement in their life. It's not just about sex or pleasure, but how do I find that spark again in myself? What do I associate pleasure with? Sometimes we go through so much things in the day-to-day, we forget what it means to feel pleasure or to feel love, to feel like we receive love. We're just kind of doing the thing. We're getting the kids to school, we're making sure they eat, they sleep, right? There's all of that, and we're trying to stay sane, but we forget what it is to feel pleasure, to feel love, and to receive that feeling from our partner. So sometimes it's just really about reconnecting with that. The other is also, we often talk about sex and pleasure in like the same sentence, but really it is kind of a whole spectrum. It isn't just whatever happens in the bedroom. It isn't just that act of sex. There is a whole spectrum when it comes to intimacy as well.
Yeah. And that's why I love that, you position yourself as like a sex, love, and intimacy coach, like defining those different things, right? How do you kind of shift gears between sex, love, intimacy? Like how do you define each of those differently?
Well, I mean, it really also depends on the cases that come to me and what what their goals are and what they want to achieve. But sex, for me, a lot of the work around sex is really around the techniques, the mindset, the triggers, and even some of the wellness and dysfunction areas that happen that doctors don't exactly treat, when it comes to like sexual pain and things like that. When it comes to love, a lot of the work is around how is our relationship with our partner, or how is our relationship to dating or to love itself. It's such a loaded concept of love. It's so big, and we have so many stories about it. We have so many beliefs growing up. Our culture plays a part, our upbringing plays a part. So what is our relationship to love? And how do we essentially, as human beings, embody love? What does that mean? We learn a lot of things in school, like maths and science and, English and different languages. Yeah. But we don't really learn what is to embody, certain feelings, embody love, and how does that feel like. We're just really out there going through achieving the day. And when it comes to intimacy, there's a lot more element of interaction with your partner. What does intimacy mean? And when I meant the spectrum just now, it was really across like what is physical intimacy like, or emotional intimacy, intellectual intimacy. There's a whole range where we can really connect with our partner. It doesn't always have to be sex. In fact, it shouldn't only be, and that's where the variety and the excitement and the exploration comes in.
It's interesting you say that, because your background does make such a huge difference. I think growing up in an Asian family, I don't think it's the norm to see parents being openly affectionate towards each other. But I was quite lucky. So for me, I did see that. I did see my parents being affectionate. But I think a lot of people that I know never saw that. So even now, they don't, as partners, show affection to their husband or their partner in front of their kids. What would you say to people to... how important is it to sort of normalize this?
Well, I mean, there is this whole idea that we model what we have for our kids, right? But showing affection is, I mean, if we're talking about the physical type of affection or the verbal type, that's to me one way of showing affection. And kids sense very different things. They sense a deeper level. They know if you truly love each other. So for me, when couples are connecting, if there is love and connection, if there is that existence of those emotions, it's really just about giving them more tools, either communications or practices tools to just be able to allow themselves to express to each other in different ways. But it doesn't always have to be physical or verbal. I mean, I saw this video online. It was really cute. And it wasn't really about love and relationship, but it was how about a husband was helping his wife around the house. Very simple stuff like lifting the
I feel
carpet.
like I need to show my husband that video.
Well, I mean, it was really interesting because it was a really simple video. His wife would be sweeping and vacuuming, and then he would lift up the carpet, because then you can get underneath, and then she would just go about her thing, and his kid is just sitting on the other side of the carpet with his toys, and that happens for a while, and then next thing you see, the dad is not around, but this is like a toddler, right? And his mom is vacuuming again, and he tries to lift the carpet.
Oh, right? That's cute.
Really sweet.
Yeah, so like I mean, in all those instances, the dad didn't go like, oh, I love you and you're so sexy, and like he's not doing like all the physical type of affection. I mean, we never know, but what I'm saying is that often there are many different ways to show that we care, and that's the other lesson as well for us in relationships, right? We often want or we think that there are certain ways that we see affection, and we're like, why aren't you doing this? So-and-so's husband does it for her this way. Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you, doing all this for me? But generally, if, someone is always taking care that you have your tea in the morning, you have to have that tea in the morning, and they're always taking care for you. That's a lot of affection as well, and it's great to also kind of show appreciation for these little things. Oh, I noticed you put the tea there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and that reminds me of obviously the really well-known concept of love languages, right? That it's important to kind of know your partner's love language and speak it to them, even if it's not yours. Are you someone who kind of uses the idea of love languages at all?
Well, I feel that love language kind of compartmentalizes it too much. So it makes it a little bit too rigid. I just generally like to make it a lot simpler, where it's really about start paying attention to the things that your partner does. I genuinely believe that two people, when they're in a relationship and there is love and affection on some level, or there is some history together, they don't wake up in the morning trying to piss each other off.
I hope that's true.
Yeah, that's not the intention. They don't go wake up and, let me piss my wife off today. What am I going to do?
How
right?
can I push a button?
Yeah, it's more like, okay, let me see how I can, make her feel better. How can I make her happy? And it's a whole different level of connection when you see your partner happy with something that you did and appreciative, and they light up because of that.
Yeah.
Right? Which is why I always say, like, just watch out for the little things and the little appreciation. For instance, opening of doors. We find that very common in this. Like, you should do that. There are some conversations that I see couples having. You should be opening the door for me. But genuinely, I don't see the issue with, like, if you see your partner doing that and your partner maybe has been doing that for the last 10 years and 15 years, there really is nothing wrong or fake about it to just thank your partner when they do that. It's just little things that they really appreciate, and a man feels quite he feels quite like, oh, manly when he knows that he has made his partner happy. He does feel quite good about himself.
Yeah. And I think that is something that's important for us to remember that have been in relationships. I mean, you've been with your partner much longer than I've been with mine, but that, they need appreciation as much as we do. So we always say, no, you don't appreciate all the things I do for the kids, and you don't see all the things I do for the house. But it's like, do we see the things that they do for the sake of our intimacy and our connection? And I think that's, an equal, they might not express it like we do, which is why it's even maybe more important that we acknowledge those little things.
Yes.
How did you get into this line of work? How did you decide that passion was your passion?
Wow. Okay. Let me see if I can make it really concise. So I started out learning very early on, like you said, Asian household and just kind of upbringing. I learned that, I had to numb my emotions. I had to, just work hard, study hard. And I had to just dumb down my expression, just don't be too expressive and just stay in your lane and do your stuff. And so as I grew older, I found that, there was really something missing, and I was doing a lot, high achieving Asian, right? Like, so I would be like doing all those leadership courses. I will be looking at executive coaching, leadership coaching, results driven coaching. And there's something that didn't quite click until I came across the course around orgasms, pleasure and emotions. And I was like, wow, we're talking pleasure and we're talking emotions. Two things that out of all the stuff that I have been exploring were the two things that will seem to be missing.
Yeah.
And they were in the same like connection and space of this course. So I did the course as a personal student, and for over 2 years I really saw quite a fair bit of change. It was really about learning how to integrate, I guess, both sides of me. The part that I thought I had to be strict and aggressive and no emotions because you need to get things done, versus the side that had to feel and be vulnerable and be open and be open to flow and uncertainty, which is very much what relationships and intimacy is. You are being very open to the possibilities that may happen, but it's also not having in control of that and being allowing to go with the flow. And so naturally after that, I saw the benefits. And when the coaching certification opened up for the first time, I interviewed, applied, and that was 5 years ago. Wow. I've really enjoyed my time since that because I've seen how transformational it is when we just start exploring such a vulnerable space in our lives, which is the intimacy and the sexual part of ourselves.
Yeah. And I love that you use the word vulnerability a lot, right? I keep thinking about what you had just mentioned about your friend, Jasmin, how she was like, I'm pretty much done with sex. Like, I'm pretty much, that part of my life is closed, right? But Andrea, on your website, you say that kind of sexual health and relationship connection is a journey back to our most authentic selves. So I think it's interesting, right? Because when I hear what you said, Jasmin, it's like this woman who's kind of said, I'm shutting off this part of myself. Mm-hmm. And then we have Andrea who's like, actually, let me help you journey back to your most authentic self. How do you feel that sex, sexual health, partner intimacy, how can that help us find our authentic selves?
Yeah, so I may be, because this is partly my work, but I may be going out on a limb to actually like state this, but I feel one of the most important growth areas in our life is really about how we heal and define our relationship to pleasure and sex. And that will be probably one of our biggest lessons. The second biggest will be our relationships, because anything happens, you're dealing with another human being, you learn a lot of lessons from there. And why that's the case is because that journey back to exploring what your sexual health or your sexual self and your relationship to pleasure is because it happens on so many levels. All these different levels of yourself need to be integrated: your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your intellectual. All these need to come along for the ride. So it becomes a very holistic journey when it's done with the intention to really just explore, experience, and find out a little bit more about yourself. The other is also the experience of pleasure and sex. And again, I like to use the word pleasure because it isn't always sexual pleasure, but the experience of pleasure and the experience of sex is really about you being present with your partner. To feel really good in that experience, you have to be very present with your partner, you have to be very present with yourself, and you're really talking about activating all your senses at the same time. So it's really one of the more, I would say, sensationally intense journey, just by trying to explore that space back to what your relationship to pleasure and sex is.
What would you say then for people who are like, oh, we need to schedule it in, it is always missionary, there's no spontaneity. How can people make it more pleasurable without it being, just routine and boring and, as it has been for however long?
Yeah, but also without it being like a whole production also, where it's like, I had to go get a costume and, and like a whip, is there a happy medium there?
Well, okay, so my parts to this, right? And I'm a bit controversial in this point where I'll say, if it works, if routine and boring and missionary works for the two couples, for the two in the couple, I would say just continue, don't try and fix what's not broken, right? But of course, for those who are like looking for a little bit more, and yes, we don't want the whole production. I mean, again, we don't have time. We have so many things going on. Yeah. It's also really interesting. Like, do we have something where we can kind of switch in that mode a little bit better? Like, so I like cheat sheets. I like little triggers where, do you know what your partner's go-to phrase is, I mean, like...
Or the look.
Or that secret signal. I like secret signals and secret languages because that's between you and your partner. And it's really fun because you get to come up with it together. You get to laugh about it like later on. And this is something that you develop between yourself. And these are things that we can kind of use to tease and play with so that when you kind of look at sex later on, it's a lot easier to kind of get in that space. Yeah. I do agree that scheduling on some level is important. I mean, like I said, busy schedules, certain things does get out of mind and we do forget sometimes. And scheduling it in does allow us to then set some space around it so we kind of prepare ourselves, or, we kind of know that, okay, I'm preparing for a date. You kind of take care of yourself emotionally or physically as you kind of move towards that date or time that you set. So I think that is important as well. And, if you don't want the full production, you could always have a little drawer of stuff that your play drawer.
Your props drawer.
Yeah. And even if it's, the conversations that you have before sex. So like, you're like, oh, what should we do to spice it up? Should we role play? What should we do? That particular conversation, I always thought was really fun to couples, and I always encourage them to do it because it's the actual process of that conversation that you learn so much about your partner, where you start having fun, even just thinking about the different ways, even if you don't eventually execute everything, right? Yeah. But like the whole conversation, like, oh, I would like to play the waitress at the bar looking for the a businessman who is alone, then he'd be like, what? That was the thing that you like, or I'd like to take on a different accent from a different country and see how that goes. So like you learn about different things from your partner and just coming up with these different stories. It's also really fun. So use that I guess planning or discussion process also is a way to create deeper intimacy.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think of that. I don't know if you guys ever watched Modern Family, that show Modern Family, but like every year on their anniversary, the two main characters would do this like the same role play. Like they would play the same characters, but they would only play them on like their anniversary or their Valentine's Day. So it was kind of like this special character they saved where they would pretend they were strangers and meet at the bar. So it's kind of like, watching that, it was like, oh, that's actually exactly what you're talking about, is having this little ritual.
Yeah, and relationships are built on these little stories and moments, right? They're not built on the big stuff. So when you kind of look back, or when you kind of celebrate anniversaries, you're like, remember we did this, or we only have this. This is something that only two of you have. So when we talk about building strong relationships where you're connected, where a lot of things can happen in the world. And how do you continue to stay together and grow together? These are the things that start to cement that connection.
And I think, it's all fun and games, I will say, to have fun and games. Meaning like it's fun to talk about role play. It's fun to go maybe to the sex toy shop and see what's new. It's fun to kind of, have these like sexy planning convos. But how about the less fun? So let's talk about women who are going through either they've gone through sexual trauma in their youth, they've just recently gone through divorce, they've experienced partner infidelity, they're not sure what's the next step for their relationship. How do you help women that are having trouble with their sexual health due to some of these issues that are not maybe sex toy redeemable, that are a bit deeper?
Yeah, so I do encounter a lot of these cases, and often it requires, like you said, safety. Because they don't feel safe, so they do need to first develop a sense of safety in their bodies and just safety with me as well in the session. So I do spend a lot of time on that, different talk sessions or different practices, just to get them in that feeling of safety. Because once they're in that space, there are a lot of things that they can also develop on their own and explore by themselves, outside the session. The other is also I like to call in my mind visually it looks like I'm holding like a balloon and I'm expanding their capacity for pleasure. So they may start out with a very small amount of capacity for pleasure because at that point, they're just shrinking themselves and closing up themselves. And what I'm doing really is not going like, let's take on some new roles and teach you to be sex goddess, tomorrow. But it's really about you have that little container for pleasure. Let's allow yourself, since you feel safe enough now, to start expanding that container for pleasure. And so it's a lot of embodiment practices because that so-called container is what they feel within their body, like in their actions, in their thoughts, in their emotions. And I work to slowly increase that container for pleasure. And I give them different practices and tools to learn about connection with self, so they can practice and they can use it in connection with self. It's really about also regulating their nervous system. And working in that direction to heal the association that they have with pain from that particular incident or a series of incidents to pleasure. So it's really about healing that association with pleasure.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really helpful. I hope that the listeners that need to hear that are hearing that because I think, repairing that relationship with yourself is probably much more important than what you could ever, work on with a partner, at least in that first stage of trauma. How do you help women that, okay, let's say they don't have any, sexual trauma or, issues there. Let's say they have a wonderful connected partner, so their intimacy relationships are good, but their relationship with their body is so problematic. They do not feel desirable. They do not feel sexually beautiful. They do not feel worthy even. They struggle to even take off their clothes with their partner. How do you help women whose their body image is kind of the big limiter?
So, with that, I understand, and every woman on some level, I think, has some degree of that, right? So it's really working around building self-love and self-worth with different parts of the body, again, with different practices and tools that I use. And I like to work towards a concept where, how we often say, I want this person to love me for all that I am, like all as I am.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I work to for those who are working their relationship with self and their body image. Because you really are about loving and encompassing everything, even the parts that you thought were ugly. And that could not just be body, it could even be smell, scent, or what you think there is. And that's something also with women that they often struggle with as well, especially when it comes to intimate health, like how they smell or how they come off to their partner. And it's so it's really about encompassing that whole all of you, like learning to love all of you, working through steps around self-worth, self-love, and feeling where you don't need to be a certain body image to be sexy and to be loved. And when you're operating from that area, I realize that a lot of women, then when they communicate, their communication partner starts to change. I don't even have to be there for both of them. You start to realize that their communication change, their partner reacts differently. They are able to express what they need. For example, like I said, if you need your partner to say, no, he needs to say, no, I really like your body as it is, and your partner needs to say it at least 3 times. That's what you need.
Yeah.
Then you start being able to express that for yourself as well. Because the really painful thing about body issues is it doesn't just affect the women. So when women are, feeling uncomfortable and they're like, I don't feel good about myself, I don't feel sexy, therefore I don't want to have sex, often when their partners are receiving it, it feels like it's not that you don't want to have sex, you don't have sex with me.
Yeah.
And then all that misunderstanding happens as well. And so sometimes it's really good to also uncover a little bit of that. What is it that they're struggling around sexual image and body image when it comes to sex and pleasure, and what can their partner kind of do to support that in that sense?
So let's say there is no partner. So I'm thinking of a lot of my girlfriends in their 40s that are, single, ready to mingle. And, they're struggling with their body image and they don't even want to put themselves out there to even be with a partner, right? So, they're struggling with their sexuality alone at home, not even feeling, well enough to go kind of seek out sexual partnership. What advice would you give to single women in their 40s who either, like I said, the friends I'm referring to, they've, never been in a long-term partnership, but also those that are re-entering the single world after maybe a long-term partnership or marriage?
Yeah. So same thing, like I mentioned just now, a lot of the practices and tools are done with self. But simple things we can do. The mirror is a great tool to help. That's really something, because the mirror is really kind of very visual and in your face.
Yeah.
I usually start off with the less triggering portions. You'll be surprised, like maybe the hair may be a triggering piece for a woman, but maybe her nose is not so much triggering, but still something she can't reconcile with. So I start off with that before we move to genitals or like different parts of the body image. The other is also, like I said, about building the self-love and self-worth type of practices. Do you feel that part of you is worth giving all that love, and all that acceptance? It's coming to that stage of their relationship with self. And when we start building it in pieces, the rest usually kind of falls into place.
I feel like one of the biggest qualities of a woman is once she's confident, she'll project that out. And then that is quite an attractive quality, because I think if you are confident enough to love yourself, your partner or a prospective partner can see that as well.
Yeah, I think that is a huge part of it, is what you project in terms of your sexuality, like whether you own your own sexuality.
Yeah, I mean, we know when a woman has done her work. We know when a woman is, kind of, I mean, she doesn't have to have all her ducks in a row, but she kind of has, she's comfortable with her body.
A couple of ducks. Maybe not all the ducks.
We need a few in a row, but she's comfortable with her body. We kind of know there's something that radiates out of her. Women are like magnets. They have that capability to really radiate out, so that people kind of it's like a. Yeah, I call it a magnet because, people kind of receive that. And so it's really about working on different practices. I usually like to start with a few triggering areas in their body image and get them to see, even sometimes take on some roles. So sometimes you're very stuck in your in yourself, and you can't see yourself in a very different space. So we do a little bit of different roles. Like what would okay, let's say if the client's name is Sandra. So what will sexy Sandra do? What will burlesque dancer Sandra do? For instance,
Sandra's getting real. I like it.
Yeah, and just to get them to play with different parts, I like to use a little bit of games and exercises, because it tricks the nervous system as well. Because I'm like, this is fun. We're going to try it for a while. You're going to do practices, and we'll come back the next session. If you don't like it, within 1 or 2 weeks, we can change it up again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could it also work with, if you've got a pair of heels that you're like, oh my God, these heels make my legs look amazing. Could you use that to make yourself feel better? Or, whether it's a particular lipstick or props, but I'm not talking, like sex toy props. I'm talking about just general things that make you feel good, that make you want to, I guess, project out that confidence to feel more attractive, to then want to proceed further and, I guess, be intimate with a partner or with a potential partner, I guess.
Yes, definitely. So that's the cheat sheet thing, right? If you know that one thing works for you, have that nearby, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, for a long time, I'll give my own personal example. For a long time during the pandemic, we were wearing masks, or we never had to go out, so there was no makeup, right? And it came to a point where I think it was everything about staying in, lack of sun, and it was just a very low period, and there was just so much to do around the house. Make sure everybody is like either healthy or fat, or we can have enough groceries because of the number of times we can go down to the supermarket, things like that. And it was a very, very low period. And the day that we had some areas open up that you didn't need a mask, I knew I could wear lipstick. And that red lipstick changed everything for me. I mean, it really lifted me out. And it's so simple, right? And it's nothing superficial about that. I mean, we do a lot of things by ourselves. Sometimes using a little tools like sex toys or like a lipstick or like even just that coat or that shirt or that inner wear. It's okay. It's okay to help.
Only
that.
you know you've got those sexy red underwear on.
Yeah, I was saying, and you brought your red lips for us today, so I can tell, she will bring the sexiness for us, girl, and I appreciate that. Well, we do have to wrap up here, Andrea, but again, you've given us, I think, infinite tools for, how we can improve our relationships with ourselves, our bodies, our sexual health. What would you tell women in their 40s is your 40s formula? How do you help women thrive and feel their best in their 40s? Give us your best formula that we can that we can apply in our own lives.
Well, I guess I can say because I'm in my 40s, so this is something that it's very dear to me. I do believe that it's something that I live by because I'm also in my 40s. And I do believe as women, we are meant to really be able to express ourselves in many, many different ways. We have not been given the chance and the permission sometimes, or we've just not been taught that it's safe to do so. So really, for me, the 40s formula is, when I say I really love my life, I mean, I know that sounds like a little cliche, but the way I love it is I'm very much about being very present and experiencing every moment, whether it's an interaction with someone. And I think that is what really excites me. That's really what allows me to explore different expressions. And I guess also in my 40s, I'm less, conscious than in my 20s and 30s. So experimentation, exploring how I like to express myself. I don't restrict myself as much. I don't think that I have to be one image or the other. So for those in their 40s, I really, encourage just more expression, play around with different things, see what works for you. You have many different parts of you. Just allow those to come out. And trust in the women around you. I think when we're in our 40s, we understand that having a community is very important. Sisterhood is important. Have these women support you in your journey and you support them as well.
Amazing. That's the no shits given hashtag. I think we need to.
I feel like that is a unifying theme for our podcast here is no shits given and be bold, right? Make your choices.
Yes.
And own them in this decade. Well, thank you so much, Andrea, for being with us. We really appreciate your insights and we're so happy that you took the time with us today.
No, thank you for having me here. Thank you.
This is Paul, our editor.
He's a 25-year-old unmarried Singaporean guy listening to the ramblings of 12 older women on everything from menopause to weightlifting to sex. So, Paul, what's your thoughts on today's conversation?
So, for me personally, I'm actually unmarried, but I do have a partner. So, initially I had a stereotype that being a sex coach means that you need to talk about like sex-related advice. But I didn't quite realize it also encompasses much more than just that. When we talk about like relational side of things or the emotional side of things between partners. So I feel my perception on that has changed, and well, I guess having a sex and relationship coach can be beneficial if you need one, I guess. Yeah. All right. Anyway, catch you guys next time. See y'all. Bye-bye.
Before we go, please remember to hit subscribe and take a moment to support the 40s Formula by leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform.
Your reviews will help us to reach more people and allow us to continue to bring valuable content. It should only take a moment, and it's a free way for you to support the show.
You can also stay updated with the 40s Formula by following us on Instagram at the 40s Formula, all one word. We share behind-the-scenes insights, episode updates, and much more, so please be sure to hit that follow button.
We appreciate your time and support. Thank you for being part of this community, and we'll be back next week for more empowering conversations with inspiring guests.
Bye. I always say this is like I am giving you the best I have.
Without being too without having an entourage.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Exactly, girl. Yeah, my entourage is my kids, which they are not help. That's not a glam squad.
Not helpful.
They're not the ones making me look better. No, they actually are. To be honest. Especially my daughter. She's ridiculous. They had the Children's Day Carnival yesterday.
Oh yeah.
And it was her first time ever playing musical chairs, and she won.
Amazing.
And the teacher sent me this whole thing of her sitting in that last chair, and they're like, Louise won musical chairs. I was like, wow, what a great day for her.